All right, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the Italian Black Hand. And just like the Yiddish Black Hand, it was not a singular organization with a boss and structure. It was really just a bunch of Sicilian extortion specialists prowling throughout some cities in America, mostly New Orleans early on, and New York City. Obviously, we have to start at the beginning. We go to Sicily. This is where you've seen the first signs of what would be later known as the Black Hand. It was just letters. La Mano Nera was the name given. They would write letters filled with threats and very real threats. Arson, kidnappings, you name it, with a demand for payment. That if you were a smart individual, you would make that payment. This is before the mafia became this ultra organized group with a rigid structure that would come later on. Now let's move forward into the 1890s, where the first real wave of Italian immigrants would make their way to American shores, most of which found their way to New York City, New Orleans, and Chicago. They brought their language, rich history, food, customs, and unfortunately, crime. The overly crowded inner cities were the perfect playground for these predators. You had a lot of people, a lot of opportunity, and a lot of opportunity to blend in, and a lot of opportunity to blend into the shadows. You had fragmented communities where fresh immigrants from different countries like Ireland, Eastern Europe, and Italy all were rubbing shoulders without having a real way to communicate with each other, which would obviously benefit criminals. These letters that they would send out to various shop owners, business owners, push cart owners, etc., usually incorporated a skull, a black handprint, a dagger, a noose. They really had a signature style, making it unmistakable of who the letter was from. Now, one of the first crimes that put the Black Hand on the map and had law enforcement take them seriously was in New Orleans, 1890. Police Chief David Hennessy, who had been investigating the Sicilian feuds on the docks, was ambushed on the night of October 16, 1890, and he was shot fatally. And his dying words were, "The Dagos shot me," and chaos ensued. Newspapers had this murder on the front pages, and now the general public has associated criminality with your average Italian. The Italians just arrived, already looked at as outsiders, and this murder did not help them and their case to try and integrate into American society. Now, as we go through the decade of the 1890s into the early 1900s, the Italian population grows and grows with every year. Neighborhoods become more developed, a little bit more sophisticated, more business, more opportunity for your average Italian, but also more opportunity for your average criminal. They became more bold, more organized, and more violent. This is where the likes of Ignacio Lupo the Wolf Lupo, Giuseppe Morello, and their whole generation rose to power. And in 1900, there became quite the disturbing trend used by the Black Hand, and it was the bombings. In a roughly 20-year span, over 300 documented bombings were carried out by the Black Hand extortionists. New York alone seen over 100 bombings for shop owners and other targets who didn't pay. Their threats were bold and were to be taken seriously, and anyone trying to fight this underworld presence found out very quickly they are not to be played with. Obviously, this presence of violence and extortion really gave a bad name to the Italian immigrants just trying to start a new life, and that was no more exemplified than Lieutenant Joseph Petrosino, who we spoke about in another video. He wanted to try and help give the image of the average Italian as an upstanding and law-abiding citizen. So he went undercover in the trenches with nothing but pride in his Italian heritage and hatred of criminality. And he was making waves, making moves, getting people arrested. Some of the hardest, most ruthless criminals he personally put cuffs on, but that just made him a bigger target. And with his largest assignment, him going to Italy to investigate these crime organizations, he unfortunately met his demise on the evening of March 12, 1909, in Palermo, Sicily. The Black Hand. Also in 1907, young Maria Barbati from Brooklyn, New York, was kidnapped on the late afternoon of September 20th. 1907. She was 5 years old, playing near her family's apartment on Sackett Street in Brooklyn. They had last seen her skipping rope, and before you know it, she was gone. The whole neighborhood, after realizing no one knew where she was, searched every alleyway, neighbors' homes. Mothers screamed, but no one heard anything. Then later on, a letter arrived. In the signature, black handprint that the Black Hand, La Mano Nera, made infamous. Pay $1,500 or you will find her dead. And the Barbati family was not wealthy. They were not well off. This was a figure that would break the family, if they could even come up with it. The letter also instructed the father to show up alone at a specific street corner, wearing a red carnation, carrying the money in a handkerchief. And if any police are found nearby, they would find her body in the Gowanus Canal. Obviously, this section of Brooklyn was absolutely stunned and shaken over this. It was one thing to threaten a business, but not a young child. But fortunately for young Maria, an informant, perhaps it was a criminal that knew what was going on, and it didn't sit well that it was a 5-year-old girl that was the target and felt guilty. Who really knows? But someone gave the police the drop of what was going on and where they seen and where she was. The police followed this tip and found Marietta, frightened, bruised, but alive. Her kidnappers were Italian immigrants, small-time criminals trying to imitate what they've been seeing the other larger, more established criminals do. Now, she was found safe, but everyone in that community was permanently scarred and could no longer trust each other. Now, in the mid-1910s, the violence, rivalries between these newly organized factions decimated each other. As they tried to establish more rackets, they realized bombing and kidnapping of children was not really a good long-term plan of action. They became a little bit more selective of who was brought into these organizations. They became more selective with the violence that they carried out and the targets of that violence. And lucky for them, Prohibition was about to give them the cash windfall that no pushcart owner or kidnapping could even come close to. That was a short history of the Italian Black Hand.